Hi, we're going to do a real simple graphic today in Illustrator. You might be able to do this in Photoshop, which I'm sure you can, but you can also do it in Illustrator. Everything I'm going to use to make this little media graphic is going to be vector based. So I have an artboard here that's 1920 by 1920. That's the aspect ratio of the graphic I want to use on my web. I'm making it this big so it's a little bit easier to work with. I have a layer over here in my layers panel because that's the first layer I always get when I open up Illustrator, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to bring in a reference graphic, I'll call it. So I'm going to go under File and I'm going to go over here to Place, and I'm going to go to my folder and I'm going to bring up here where it says, let's say, guest Wi-Fi JPEG. Let me hit the space bar so you can see what I'm reproducing. And I'll place that, and I'm going to go into this corner up here, and I'm going to click my placement gun and put it right there. This is what I want to recreate here in Illustrator. I'm going to double click on my layers panel. Now I double clicked on the layer 1, and I'm just going to rename this artwork. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this layer and select it. I'm going to go to the hamburger menu in the upper right. And I'm going to come down to Template. And that's going to lock this layer and dim the visibility down to about 75%. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer in the lower corner. I'm going to click on the Create New Layer icon. I'm going to double click on that. And I'm going to name this, let's say, Artwork. Also, I think I'm going to add another layer. In fact, I'm going to double click on this artwork up here where I typed in artwork. I'm going to put in my artwork so you're not confused. And also I'm going to add another layer here. And I'm going to use this to put some guidelines on my document. Now the reason I'm using a specific layer and selecting it for guides, because it's going to be easy to hide those guides whenever I want to. So I'm going to pull a guide down from the top ruler. I'm going to mark it where this top blue rectangle ends. I'm going to also bring it down to the top of this Wi-Fi graphic and the bottom of it. This is the size I would like my web graphics to be, this height. So once I've got those established, I'm going to lock down the layer by clicking in open space to the right of the eyeball by guides. I'm going to go back to my artwork and I'm going to get myself a rectangle tool. And I'm going to draw out a rectangle. And this is going to be the size of this top graphic. Now that was put on the My Artwork layer. I'm going to click this little triangle and it shows you rectangle. It has a red or colored square here to let me know it's selected, which it is. I'm going to double click and I'm going to name this top rectangle. Then I'm going to go over to my Properties panel. I'm going to click on Fill. I'm going to click over here and make sure I'm on this little icon right here, Color Mixer. It's already in RGB mode. Let's say yours isn't. You can go to the hamburger menu and pick RGB. So down here, I can start dragging around to pick a color. Or if I know there's a specific hex color I want, I can type it in right here. Now I don't know a hex color I want to use. I'm just going to use this light blue. So what I'm going to do here next is I'm going to hit this hamburger menu and I'm going to create a new color swatch and store this color in my swatch panel. So you could put in your hex number here, which is probably what you want to do if you're going to use hex. Replace it with the hex number. In fact, let me type it in. It's 74F, 74F, 9FF, and I will click OK. So now that's done. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to go back to my Layers panel, make sure I'm still on the My Artwork layer. I'm going to draw another rectangle. Now this is the one down below here. Now this rectangle I'm going to put here, and I'm going to fill it with, we'll say at this juncture, how about white, by clicking on this little default swatch. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click off, and I'm going to come over here to my layers panel, double click on that rectangle object I just made and name it bottom rectangle, and click. I'm going to move the top rectangle in the stacking order above the bottom rectangle, and I'm going to actually hide the bottom rectangle for right now. In fact, why did the bottom rectangle remain blue? Let me go back to Properties, to Fill, to White. Strange, but anyway, now it's white. So now I'm going to actually hide that layer, the bottom one, because I need to bring in this graphic. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm on the My Artwork layer. I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Place, and I'm going to place a vector graphic I got off a stock graphic site called called Wi-Fi Symbol. I'm going to hit my space bar on my Mac so I can see it right away. That looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and click Place. Now I know I want this graphic this height. Irregardless of its width, I want it this height. So I'm going to go to this guide. I'm going to press, not click, and drag out the size, the height I want. There's the height I want. Now, you got to switch to your selection tool. You can either click on it, or you can hit the letter V by itself, and that will select it. And then I'm going to move this over. Now you could use your arrow keys on your keyboard, or you can carefully press and drag it over, and when you see that vertical line come up in the middle there where it says intersect, that's a smart guide telling you and me that this is dead center. On the artboard it's called. So I'm going to come over here in my layers panel where it says group, because all those little band lines are individual objects and it's been grouped. I'm going to double click on the group. I'm going to name it Wi-Fi SVG, because I know it's an SVG graphic, which means scalable vector graphic, so I can make it any size I want. Next thing I'm going to do is I need to add some text up here. And we're going to have that say, but I can't remember what it was. So let's hide the artwork layer for a second. Oh, it says guest Wi-Fi. Now, let's go back to My Artwork. Let's hide that top rectangle for a minute. Let's do this. I want to keep my text, if it's going to be this one line text, I'm going to pull a guide down and I'm going to mark the baseline, or where that text is writing on. This is called the baseline. I'm going to move a guide down. So I know it's going to write on that, and I'm going to center it eventually. So let me put that guide back into the guides layer by unlocking the guides layer, and then drag this into guides and then lock it. So now I can make sure I'm on the My Artwork layer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over in this toolbox, and there's a little bitty box over here that says Default, Fill, and Stroke. And I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to click my Type tool. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to, let's say, click. And I'm going to type in, well boy, it's really small. Well, let's see here. Let's change that. Myriad Pro, regular, let's change it to bold, and let's change it to something like 250 points high. Wow, that was a pretty good guess, wasn't it? Well, that's a lie. I checked it before, so I knew pretty much what size to make it. So let me bring it down on that baseline guide. Let me double click and get over the type tool and highlight it and type in guest Wi-Fi. That looks pretty good. Let me take my selection arrow and I'll drag this over until it lines up. Now, wonder why it isn't lining up. Oh, because the text defaults to left justification, not center. So let's go up here in the control panel, pick upper right, and pick align center. Then let's see if we can drag this over, and there's that vertical line. I'm on dead center. Looks pretty good. It does look like this type is spread out a little bit, like the tracking is a little bit wider. It could be just the font. If you want to adjust what's called the tracking or the spacing between all these letters, let's highlight all those. Let's go to properties. Let's go to character. Let's go over down here to where it says V and A with a rectangle on it. And let's run the tracking up here a little bit to kind of air this out. And it's up to you how much you want it. Let's make it an even number like 30. That looks pretty doggone good. So that's called tracking. So this is basically all done. Let's go over here now, back to our selection arrow. Let's go to our layers panel and let's do this. Let's hide the guides, hide the artwork, and turn on the top rectangle visibility. Well, that looks pretty doggone good, doesn't it? So now there's my graphic. Now, if I'm going to save this as a ping, this bottom area here will be transparent unless I show the bottom rectangle as white. If you're going to save it as JPEG, you don't even have to use the bottom rectangle. Let's say I'm going to make a JPEG. So the next step is I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to export it out of Illustrator as a JPEG file. So let me save this. I'm going to name this MKL Guest Wi-Fi. I'm going to go over here to File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. This is one way to do it. Now I'm going to come to the lower left-hand corner where it says 100%, and I'm going to change that to Fit on Screen. In fact, we'll put that on Fit on Screen. I'm going to come over to the upper right. It says here there's some presets. Here's JPEG Low, Medium, Ping 24, High. So if I pick High, the file is going to be bigger in file size and more time to download, but better quality. Medium's going to be a medium quality, medium time. I'm going to change this to high, and I'm going to have you look back in this lower left corner again, and it says it's going to be 106K. If I change it from JPEG high to JPEG low, it's going to be 38.86K. So you have to kind of make a decision. I know it's not going to be this big because I made it this big. This image size over here says it's 1920 by 1920. I just did that to keep the aspect ratio of this, work with it larger, but now I can actually export it out as a JPEG low codec, and I'm going to change it down to the size I think I might want to use it. In fact, I'm going to save it out twice the size I think I want to use it. So I'm going to type in 200, and because the width and the height have been linked, it's now going to drop it to 200. If I want to see how this would look on a website, I can come down to the lower left corner where it says Preview. And I'll bring my web page over here because it opened on my other screen. And there you go. That's the exact size it's going to be. It's going to be the exact way it's going to look. I'm going to quit out of my browser. And I'm going to come over here and say, yeah, that's what I need. In fact, in the lower left corner, you may want to change it now to 100% so you can actually see it here too. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come down and I'm going to come to the Save button in the lower right corner. Then I can name this whatever I want to, and I'm going to put an underscore, and I'm going to put in 200, and I'm going to put in underscore low. So I know it's 200 pixels, and it's the low JPEG compression, and I'm going to click Save. Now I'm back here in Illustrator again. In fact, I could use this as a template. I could double click here and I could type in, let's say another word. In fact, like guest, and then maybe services. And I could come over here and I could turn my guides back on. I could click on this graphic. I could delete it. I'm on the artwork layer. I could go to File, Place. Let's say we do News, SVG. Come over here, go to the guide, press and drag. Don't click, press and drag. And then just drag it out the size I need. Bring it over here. I'm going to drag it to the right. And I'm looking for my smart guide. Whoa, there it is. My smart guide kicked in. And I'm ready to go. Now just say for one more thing. I brought in this SVG graphic. It's over here in the Layers panel under Group. I'm going to double click that and change the name so I know what it is. I'm going to name it News _ Globe _ SVG, just to keep my sanity. And because it is an SVG graphic, I can change its color. So with it selected, I can go over here to Properties. It says the fill color is black. I can make it that color. And I can click off. I can go back to Layers. And because it was made up of multiple objects to make this whole web graphic, there's a triangle or a pointer by News Globe SVG. Here's all the parts of it. So if I want to click off and just come over here on, let's say where it says the path of the globe, I could click on this little circle, go to Properties, go to Fill, and change it. Go back to Layers, and I want to change the N, Shift key, click S, E, and N, all those circles. I can target or select those. And now I'm going to go over to Properties and I'm going to change the color of the NEWS to, let's say, yellow. Go right back under File, go right back to Export, Save for Legacy. It's on JPEG low. Put in my output size, let's say 200 pixels, tab. Right there it is. Preview it. Life is good. I don't like it, but life is good. And we're right back here. So I'm going to click Done. So I hope this helps. It's just a little bit of a primer, a review on how to easily work with things in Illustrator and save things using the legacy output for web, and also going in here and working with layers and actually bringing in that piece of artwork as a reference And remember, we clicked on that artwork when we brought it in, and we selected the artwork. We clicked on it and we went over here to the pop-up menu and we told it to be a template. And that locked it and dimmed it back so we could use it kind of as a reference as we built this.